think we're good.
Okay. Jane and Mike, you agree? Okay, shall we begin?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
All right. Good morning again, everyone. Just for the sake of the recording, my name is Richard Weinberg, and it's a privilege to serve as the rector of St. Margaret's. Welcome to your annual parish meeting. Told by the bishop that St. Margaret's is indeed the first parish in the diocese to attempt an annual meeting virtually. So this is perhaps not the kind of trailblazing we would have wanted, but yet again, here we are making history. So a little bit of orientation to how this will work from a technical standpoint. You're logged into a computer through Zoom. We recommend that you use the speaker mode for this meeting, so you can see who's speaking larger than all the Brady Bunch heads at once. Sometimes during the meeting, we will be sharing slides like you see now, but other times we'll stop the slide so you can see the person who's speaking even larger. Also know that everyone's mics are automatically muted right now. We will be pausing it several times throughout the meeting to take questions or hear from those who are on the phone. If you're on a computer or smartphone app, please use the chat box to make your comment or ask your question at the appropriate time. And each time that we pause for questions, we'll also pause to invite anyone who's joining by phone to speak. If you're on the phone, you will need to press *6 on your touchpad to unmute yourself, both for landline and mobile phones. And I'll give these instructions again when each time that this happens. I'd also like to advise everyone that this meeting is being recorded for the parish archives and to facilitate the secretary in taking minutes. So if for privacy reasons you do not want to be filmed, please be sure to turn off your video camera. And in fact, if you're ever having connectivity issues, it's a good practice to turn off your camera because it uses more bandwidth. Because we have a few videos to show you, so we want to make sure that everyone's connections are as strong as can be. And of course, we apologize in advance for any technical problems on our end, but we're working hard to make this meeting go as smoothly as possible. So with that, let us pray. Almighty and ever-living God, source of all wisdom and understanding, be present with us as we take counsel in St. Margaret's annual parish meeting for the renewal and mission of your church. Teach us in all things to seek first your honor and glory. Guide us to perceive what is right and grant us both the courage to pursue it and the grace to accomplish it. Through Jesus Christ, our Savior. Amen. At this time, I would like to call the 2020 annual meeting of St. Margaret's Parish to order and appoint Jade Williams as secretary of the meeting. Now, I would like to call on Mason Ingram, who oversaw registration for today's meeting, and along with Miranda Cooter, will be ensuring a fair and secure election process to verify that we have reached a quorum. Mason?
Thank you, Richard. St. Margaret's bylaws state that at any annual meeting of St. Margaret's Parish, the presence of 15% of the voting members of St. Margaret's Parish shall constitute a quorum. We currently have 220 voting members, and there are, at last count, at least 75 members logged into this virtual meeting, so a quorum is present.
Thank you, Mason. That's great news. And thank you, everyone participating in this meeting, for your patience and your understanding for us to do it in this way so that the business of the parish can continue even during a pandemic. Now I'm excited to share a video greeting from our bishop, Right Reverend Marianne Edgar Buddy. Let me make sure. Right, share computer sound.
Hello, St. Margaret's. It's Bishop Marianne, and I am happy to greet you as you embark on your annual meeting, and I pray that it goes well. And my goodness, what a year this has been for all of us. And I'm mindful of some of the milestones in particular for you as a church during your 125th year, celebrating St. Margaret's ministry in Washington, D.C. It was the year when your wardens, Jane Quenk and Mike Armstrong, ably led the vestry to its decision to call Richard Weinberg as rector, a decision that thrilled all of us in the diocese. So as we know now that you will creatively engage in ministry together for years to come. I want to thank you for your collaborative spirit, the way you partner in ministry with your sister congregations across Central DC and beyond, for the ways that you have been so strategic and intentional in your planning for what you pray is God's preferred future, for the ways that you feel called to embody an expression of Jesus and his gospel that engages and welcomes all people, and for your hopefulness, your resilient hopefulness that is guiding you through the time of pandemic toward a new way of being church, one that we're all experiencing together. And I pray that we all come out of this time with lessons learned and new tools for ministry that will only strengthen our witness when we can return to worship fully and freely in our sacred spaces. So today, I want you to know that I'm grateful to God for you. I give thanks for the privilege of being your bishop. I believe in you and the ministry that is entrusted to you by God. And as you meet, know that your bishop and so many across the diocese are praying with you and for you and wanting nothing but the best for the ministry of the church and for each one of you as members of the community in your walk with God and in your mission and ministry in this world. God bless you, God keep you, and I hope to see you soon.
I'm grateful to the bishop for taking the time to make that greeting for us. We now move to the report for the vestry nominating committee. We will hear from Senior Warden Jane Quenk, who chaired this committee.
Thank you, Richard. This year's nominating committee included Anamita Betancourt, Suzanne De Felice, Chris Kimmel, Jade Williams, Mason Ingram, and myself. We are pleased to present to the parish a slate of 8 candidates for 6 open vestry member positions. Just to remind everyone, a vestry term is 2 years, and each vestry member can elect to rerun for another 2-year term. So we have on our vestry candidates, Kathy Conley, who is currently serving as our treasurer, Farrah Elliott, Garrison Gordon, John Lucas, Anna Kamitic, Julie Poulter, Richard Villeneuve, who is an incumbent running for a 2nd term, and Marty Williams, who's an incumbent running for a 2nd term. We're also pleased to present Mike Armstrong as candidate for senior warden, the position being vacated by me. He was my junior warden, so in order to have a consistency of leadership, Michael and Richard thought that would be a good choice, and I think it's a great idea. And we're also presenting Jenny Carson as candidate for junior warden, currently held by Mike Armstrong. Both wardens candidates are running unopposed, and this concludes the nominating committee's report.
Thank you, Jane. And to the whole committee, we have an amazing slate of candidates. I'm grateful to the committee for their work. Now, as stipulated by our parish bylaws, at this time we open floor for any additional nominations to stand for election to the vestry. A nomination may be made by any member of St. Margaret's, but must be duly seconded, and the candidate you name must agree to accept the nomination before they would be placed on the ballot. Please indicate if you would like to nominate someone by typing in the chat box. Or if you are joining us by phone at this time, please press *6 to unmute yourself if there are any nominations from the floor. No need to unmute everyone. Going once, going twice. Hearing none and seeing no chat. Thomas Head, I was about to do the same. Thomas Head has moved that the nominations be closed, which I second. All those in favor, please raise your hands and wave. Type in the chat box, yes. Thank you, everyone. The nominations are now closed. I will now call on Mason Ingram to explain how voting will work.
Okay, thank you, Richard. So we received guidance from the Diocese of Washington to conduct our elections through a secure online voting platform called Election Buddy. All members of the parish who registered were invited as part of the registration process to either opt in to receive an electronic ballot via email or to request a paper ballot. Paper ballots have already been mailed to those who've requested them to date. And our lay Eucharistic visitors in some cases are also authorized to take some of our homebound parishioners' votes by phone. For the majority of you, now that nominations are closed, I will send out the electronic ballot to each of your inboxes. You will receive an email from the Election Buddy system. It will provide a unique URL for you to use. You should simply be able to click on the link and vote for your selections. It will ask you to confirm your selections, and then you will submit your ballot. So I will be sending the emails shortly after this meeting ends. So please be in touch with me today or tomorrow if you haven't, if you're concerned or if you haven't received anything. Voting is going to stay open through this coming Friday. So there should be ample time for you to cast your vote or to troubleshoot with me if you're not seeing your invitation email. And I can put my email address in the chat box too, if that's helpful for you.
I think that would be wise. I have one question already. I think we should pause and address any questions. If you do have a question about how this voting process is going to work, please speak up through the chat box. Naomi has asked, can a member who didn't attend this meeting still vote? So as has been explained, we need you to register so that we know that you are a qualified voting member of the parish. So I'm happy to troubleshoot in specific cases if that person would make themselves known and let Mason know that they would like to vote, so we can verify that they are a voting member of the parish, which means that you that we know you were baptized, you're marked as a member in our register, that you have attended worship at least 3 times in the past year, and what's the third thing? Oh, and that you have contributed in volunteer service or financial contributions, and our bylaws state that no minimum is required. So anyone who meets those requirements can vote, but we needed to have a registration process. So we're now in the midst of the meeting. So if anyone is in touch before Friday, I would say then yes, we will find a way for them to vote. Any follow-up, Naomi? Are there any other questions about voting? So I'd say be in touch with Mason tomorrow if by tomorrow morning you don't see an email from Election Buddy, and also check your spam folder. You could possibly end up there. Thank you, Mason, for ensuring. Okay, I think we're ready to move on. To clarify. Yes, thank you. So, attendance at the meeting is not required, but registering is. So we're ready to move on to our ministry reports. And our first report is from Reggie Cox, director of Charlie's Place, who has a short video greeting for us.
Greetings. My name is Reginald Cox. I am the program director of Charlie's Place. That is St. Margaret's biggest ministry. I've been the program director since November the 1st, and it's been a very rewarding job. I come by the job because I haven't been a client, and it's done wonders for me in a difficult time for me that I had in a part of my life. I want to give a brief report on Charlie's Place and how we're doing in the year, basically. It's been a very unusual year. We had some good momentum and we had some good things going and the programs were going very well. But unfortunately, the COVID-19 struck, and in March 22nd, we had to alter our program due to the social distancing and the shutdowns. So what we went to is we didn't want to close totally. We decided that it's important for Charlie's Place to continue the ministry and to reach out to our guests. So we decided to do bag meals and at the door in the mornings and AMs, and also we do clothing, and we receive mail. We give out mail for the clients, and it's important, I think, because they know that we're still here, and they feel it makes them feel comfort because they know that Charlie's Place is still here, and we still care for them and care about them, the most vulnerable of our city. So we each morning in clothing we give out along with the meals. Thanks to our volunteers who make our bag lunches, and some of the members, the parishioners of the church, they also contribute water and clothing. So we're able to continue our ministry in this new state. So we want to, when I say it's important, because I enjoy what we're doing, the staff, we're enjoying what we're doing, and we want to continue it. And so eventually, when we do open in phase 1 of Charlie's Place, it'll be different. It'll be, obviously, we'll have to set up a place to make it safe and distant, socially distanced for our guests who come in. And it won't be like it was before, where we allow in large numbers, but it will be maybe in phases, maybe let maybe a few in, 15 or 20. And after they eat, we will clean thoroughly, and then we'll let in the next group like that. But that'll just be the first. The first phase will just probably do bag lunches. So everything is on the table. It's all being discussed, but we just think that it's important to continue our ministry going into the year, and who knows what the future holds, but we know that we want to be here and be a presence in this community because it's very important. Thank you.
We thank Reggie for that report. I'm going to talk quite a bit about this place in my own address, but I'm grateful that Reggie make that report for us, video. And I'd now like to call on Paige Cottingham-Streeter, Chair of our Stewardship Committee, to give a brief report on stewardship. Paige?
Thank you, Richard. Good morning. Good morning, St. Margaret's. I just wanted to offer appreciation for this opportunity. It's awkward not to see everybody, but it's lovely to be able to feel your presence. Last year, the Stewardship Committee was comprised of a wonderful team. I'll remind you, it was Michael Armstrong, Anamita Betancourt, David Bowling, Karen Castro, Annie Elliott, Chris Kimmel, Jane Quank, and Andy Reese. And apologies if I've overlooked a name. I think that's the complete list. We branched off into a new type of stewardship. We launched the Taking the Next Step campaign. You'll remember that it was more focused on us as disciples of God, thinking about how we can grow in generosity, thinking about where we might find the spiritual motivation to give and to serve, rather than thinking about what the church needs to operate. And that resonated with all of us. We not only had wonderful conversations, but we also considered not only our time, but also the talent. And recognizing that St. Margaret's is what it is, as we say, because of everybody in my screen and all of the contributions you make, I'm going to give you a few numbers that are a reflection of the treasure that you've given. And so in total, we were 107 pledgees who pledged $443,832. And that's exciting. It was a significant, a 10% increase from last year. For me, what was more significant and exciting is the fact that we had 25 new donors. That's 25 units, individuals or families who decided to get on the step. And 52, more than 50% of you decided to increase your pledges. And that speaks volumes, and it buoyed us, frankly, into the time where we are now, knowing that we have a community that's spiritually fed, that is willing to make a financial investment in St. Margaret's future, and know that the committee, now that we've become accustomed to meeting virtually, will be meeting in the days ahead and thinking about the next phase of our stewardship campaign. So you'll be hearing more from us, and we look forward to the positive response that you've already provided to our community. Thank you. And I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Paige. Oh wait, I scrolled the wrong direction. Blair asks, is the calendar year, is our fiscal year the calendar year? And yes, it is. So these numbers, but the campaign numbers are dollars pledged for the current year we're in. When Kathy speaks, she'll be speaking about the calendar year 2019 behind us. Does that answer your question, Blair? Gabriel asks, do you have any information about the decreases or the stopping?
Yes. Well, I know what I can speak to in conversation, and maybe Richard has additional information. We did experience a number of parishioners who relocated this year, and so that significantly impacted. That is a reflection of that number that you see. I don't know if there are any more families, Richard, that you can speak to.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, pastorally, I know the situations of each family, and so I don't think I need to elaborate much, but it definitely was a combination of circumstances that are personal and pastoral, and then in not a large number, but in a number of cases, and I think it's okay to say one, in the stop pledging, one particular family was very, very, very generous, and so that dollar amount reflects a large portion of their gifts specifically. It's only 5 households.
Right.
And Kathy will be speaking more to both 2019 and where we are year to date.
I will just say thank you to all of you who did pledge and who are continuing to fulfill those pledges. These are unprecedented and challenging times, and we know that your gift is important and is meaningful. So thank you personally for that.
And I want to thank Paige and the committee for their leadership, and everyone who responded so generously. Stewardship is about fulfilling the mission that God has given us, and we're blessed that so many of you affirmed that mission by correctly discerning to support us. And now it is time to hear from our treasurer, Kathy Connolly, to provide a report on the parish's financial position. Kathy.
Thank you, Richard, and good morning, everyone. I'm going to say a few words about the Finance Committee and its work, and then move into slides showing income and expenses for each of the Paris and Charlie's Place, and then followed by a slide showing the values of the church's investment accounts. If you have questions, feel free to enter them into the chat box, and I'll answer them at the end of my report. And also at the end, if you are dialing in and not on Zoom, you can press *6 to unmute yourself to ask a question then. I want to thank the 2019 members of the Finance Committee, Richard, Jane, and Michael, along with Sharon Dove, Jonathan Nurse, Todd Torres Douglas, and Marty Williams. And also welcome Brian Valley, who joined the Finance Committee this year. The committee was supported by Nibby Winston, the church's bookkeeper, and by a team at FBB Capital Partners, which is the parish's investment advisor and where our investment funds are held. Our operating funds are held at TD Bank. Your Finance Committee prepared the 2019 annual budget for the vestry review and approval, and monitored it throughout the year, as well as developed fundraising ideas in 2019. The committee supported the pop-up jewelry and treasure sale and developed what I like to call a fundraiser in perpetuity through the Amazon Smile program, where a percentage of eligible purchases on Amazon are donated to the parish. The committee was working on new fundraising ideas this year when the world took a pause in March, but we were able to roll out the ink cartridges fundraiser just in time before that happened. So now let's go to the slides. If I could have the first slide, please. This slide shows the operating revenue and expenses for the church last year. As you can see, operating revenue was $595,441, with the greatest source of our revenue coming from pledges, followed by plate and facilities rental. And when we talk about facilities rental, that includes money the church receives from Dignity, its monthly tenants, and for room rentals for group meetings. We also received fundraising revenue. That's from the rummage sale, Maggie's Cabaret, and the pop-up jewelry and treasure sale. And the other revenue we received includes interest on our money market account and memorials and donations. On the right-hand side of the slide, you see the church's operating expenses, which were $583,522 last year. And you see the categories of expense on the left hand side of the bar graph, where the largest share of expenses is personnel, followed by the needs of our buildings and grounds and general administrative. As you can see, income exceeded expenses, and the church actually had a surplus in 2019 of nearly $12,000. This is a very positive development, especially in light of our recent past deficit spending. And I'll say tighter expense controls developed in the office by Richard and Tim, greater giving, thanks to Page's committee, and higher fundraising revenue really turned the projected 2019 deficit into a surplus. In addition to operations spending, the church had capital spending of more than $200,000 for the upgrade of technology infrastructure in the office and parish hall, as well as the repair and renovation of the rectory. The church was able to pay for these repairs, renovations, and upgrades in 2019, as well as, if you remember, the replacement of the heating system and a recent repair of the roof, only because of the generosity of parishioners who've come before us. In fact, more than $750,000 has been given to the parish by the estates of parishioners who've passed away in the last few years. And last year, the estate of Margaret Hunter gave a generous gift. Frankly, without their gifts, it's difficult to see how the church would have financially survived. I urge everyone to consider including the church in their estate planning. We're going to look now at the operating finances of Charlie's Place, if you would mind putting up the next slide. Charlie's Place received income of $222,032 in 2019 through gifts from individuals and grants from foundations. Its expenses were $251,688. Its areas of greatest expense were personnel, food service, and building and grounds. That is the share of space and services in St. Margaret's. For Charlie's Place, expenses exceeded income, and for 2019, it had a deficit in operations of $29,656. When Charlie's Place has a deficit, it first draws on any surplus giving funds it has from prior years. If there are no surplus funds from prior years, the church covers the deficit. In 4 of the last 5 years, Charlie's Place has run a deficit. May I have the next slide, please? This slide shows the value of the church's investment accounts. The church has 2 investment accounts managed by FBB Capital Partners. The first account I've called the vestry account. It holds funds that are both restricted and unrestricted. When needed to fund operations, unrestricted money, that is money that can be spent for any purpose, in this account is transferred to our operating account at TD Bank. Restricted funds in this account have been designated either by the giver or by the vestry for a specific purpose. Examples of restricted funds include funds in the Susan Blue Building Fund, funds in a newly created technology fund, or funds given for the stained glass windows. The second investment account is the outreach investment account. It was created nearly 20 years ago when a $200,000 gift was given by the estate parishioner, and the vestry restricted its purpose to outreach and then designated that only income generated by the account could be dispersed. For comparison purposes, I've given you the balances in these accounts for 2018 year end and last year end, and actually last Thursday when I prepared the slide. As you can see, an undulating stock market has had an effect on the accounts. And in 2020, the parish has had to draw down nearly $100,000 from the vestry investment account to cover operations. I'd like to point out that without the $750,000 in bequests over the last few years, the vestry account would be drawn down to zero. In closing, the financial operations at the church are moving into a better position from the recent past. The combination of stronger pledging, contributions, and fundraising coupled with tighter expense control positions the church well for the future. And I'd like now to go to questions. I know Heidi asked a question early on in terms of how are we doing in terms of people being able to fulfill their pledges this year. I would say that there has been great response among parishioners and that pledges are running very well this year and are not quite to budget, but we had not seen a great discrepancy from this time last year. Okay, from Carlin, where are the outreach expenses? Carlin, the outreach expenses are included in the category of the St. Margaret's expenses called other expenses. They, along with other smaller categories of expenses, were grouped together. If you, I know you're chair of the outreach committee, if you would like to know what the 2019 outreach expenses are, I can get that number to you. From John, are the Charlie?
May I
Richard?
May I remind the oh, my audio is broken. No, I'll type it.
Okay. From John, are the Charlie's Place numbers also included in the overall church budget from the previous slide? No, we separated out the St. Margaret's operation numbers and the Charlie's Place operation numbers. So the slide that's on the screen now is St. Margaret's revenue and expenses. And Richie from Gale. Charlie's Place is no longer in the combined federal campaign. Was that not a useful means of fundraising? Yes, it is a useful means of fundraising. I understand that Charlie's Place is making application to rejoin the CFC.
That's correct. I don't know why. Will hear me?
From Gabrielle, is there one particular category in Charlie's Place that we need more funds for? I think that's a programmatic question, and so I think I need to ask folks who work with Charlie's Place to answer that. Richard just said he wanted to remind the parish that St. Margaret's contributes 50% of the overhead for Charlie's Place operations, which is a little shy of $50,000, the overall overhead. From Chris Kimmel, you mentioned $750,000 in bequests the last few years. How far back are you referring? I'm referring to 3 years worth of bequests. And is that in line with historical averages, or is that a big bump? Over the 25 years that I've been with the parish, we have experienced sort of undulating, what one parishioner used to call miracle money, that is in the form of bequests. I know that in the early 2000s, one estate left $600,000. I would say the last 3 years, the $750,000 though is high. It was a big bump from probably the same period immediately before. From Ann Ritchie, Richard, where in the church budget is that $50,000? I think from Annie, I think you're referring to where is the $50,000 on the Charlie's Place overhead. So you're not seeing slides of the budget. You're seeing slides of the roll of revenue and expenses. In the budget, there are line on track. The overhead to Charlie's Place and the amounts and the amount covered by St. Margaret's and the amount covered by Charlie's Place. Elizabeth Wakefield, what is the forecast for rental income in 2020? That's a very interesting question. When the vestry approved the 2020 budget, it was anticipated there would be a full year of rental income from all tenants and room renters. The vestry reviewed the budget and passed a revised budget in its May meeting, where we anticipated a pause in rental income from March through August. So we expect that we will not see a full year of rental income, but approximately 7/12 of the budgeted rental income, which, as you see from the St. Margaret slide, facilities rental is an important contributor to the overall revenue of the parish. From John Lucas. Okay, that's not a, Richard is going to say more about Charlie's Place and finances in his address. It appears that my audio is off for some people, but on for others. So my apologies for that technology. From John Lucas, did the parish choose to apply for a PPP loan? I realized that was not a decision all churches made. There was a great deal of discussion by the wardens, Richard and me, and by the full vestry about the payroll protection program and loan. The PPP required certain assumptions in order for its application and for its forgiveness at the end of the year. And the church didn't feel like it was in a position to meet all of those assumptions. So we did not apply for a PPP loan. Let's see. I don't see any further questions in the chat, so let me ask anyone who is dialing in by phone, if you'd like to ask a question, to press *6, unmute yourself and ask your question. Well, hearing no questions, I will conclude my report. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Kathy. Is my echo still there? I think someone told me that it might have been because both of our audios were on at the same time. So I'm hearing my audio being normal now. Please say so if that's echo. Thank you. I was trying to explain in response to John and Annie's question that the Charlie's Place overhead is not listed as a direct expense in St. Margaret's budget. The overhead expenses show up in actual expense categories in a percentage of my and Tim's time and Nibby's time. So that shows up in a personnel offset, a building usage offset, and administrative costs offset. So I think we're ready to move on to our wardens. We're going to have reports both from the junior and senior wardens separately, and I believe Mike will go first. I'm going to stop the screen share so we can, because they don't need any visuals, so we can see Mike and Jane in full screen.
Okay, thank you, Richard. It's my pleasure to share with you the results of the hard work from our many volunteers who focused on activities that have added value to our parish through utilization of our property, impacting our community, and celebrating our space. So let me start first with a report from the Building and Grounds Committee. I want to especially thank former chair and current vestry liaison, Todd Torres Douglas, for helping with this report. Just an overview, the Building and Grounds Committee serves as the stewards of St. Margaret's Episcopal Church facilities and grounds. The facilities include the sanctuary, the 1830 townhouse, the rectory, which is located at 2324 Ashmead Place Northwest, as well as any future buildings and land owned or managed by the vestry. The Building and Grounds Committee advises the vestry regarding space utilization, maintenance and repair, strategic planning, and development of St. Margaret's facilities. Daisy Njoku is the current chair of Building and Grounds. And then we had several vestry members also serving: Miranda Cooter, Regina Curran, who's just transitioning off the vestry, Todd Torres Douglas, who's just transitioning off the vestry, Carolyn Eves Goff, who is on the vestry and their strategic planning partner, also Chris Kimmel and John Payne, and our sexton Damon Clements. Current and proposed future projects from the B&G committee include general maintenance and repairs. Among items that are tagged for replacement or upgrade when feasible are the sound system, security cameras, and sanctuary lighting system. The committee also considers it a priority to address gutter cleaning and stormwater management to resolve significant runoff and soil erosion around the church. Columbarium expansion. A desired project is developing larger niches to accept multiple urns. To do this, the vestry will need to hire an architectural firm to design the expansion of the columbarium. Architectural support. As we move forward toward reoccupation of our campus, a pending project involves measurements, floor plans, occupancy load calculations, and exhibits to be developed for marketing of available spaces for lease and/or short-term rentals. Development plan for church properties. The vestry has engaged a real estate consulting firm to identify all the possible options for the development of church properties to maximize revenue generation while protecting the historic church. And now on to projects that have been completed. We've renovated and repaired the rectory. There have been repairs of damaged plaster walls in the area near the kitchen and the stairwell to the nursery. We've installed new tile flooring in the area between the bathrooms and the kitchen. New water fountain has been installed by the bathrooms. New wood flooring has been put in the rector's office. And a repair has been done of a section of the flat roof above the parish hall. Regarding our stained glass windows, in February, with the original plan developed by Charlie Grizzle, we celebrated the repair and reinstallation of most of our stained glass windows that face Connecticut Avenue, thanks to an allocation from the vestry and donations from the Martin and Fuller families. The restored windows are now protected by transparent and protected glass to ensure greater light, with the window infrastructures are strengthened for a long life ahead. Our ongoing relationship with Shenandoah Glass will allow us to pursue further restoration efforts in the future. Our gardens. A special thanks to Patty Lemmerman, our resident landscape architect, and her husband, Jim Wolford, for adopting all things green, growing, and garden worthy. At the church, Jim has been weeding the planting beds about once a week. He and Patty recently installed a drip irrigation system to address the challenges of slope and sun on our church grounds. At the rectory, Patty and Jim worked with Richard to develop a new rectory garden in the front yard. Richard used remaining funds from rectory donations and his own donations to purchase those materials. Regarding Maggie's Cabaret, the cabaret series known as Maggie's Cabaret celebrated its 17th anniversary in May, and it's been my pleasure to serve as co-founder and co-producer with Cindy Hutchins, who works so hard to find just the right talent, and she encourages budding cabaret performers to contribute to our series. Since our last annual meeting, Guy Bosworth did his solo show Born on Broadway in November, and we hosted the 4th installment of Hearts and Darts with 7 members of the DC Cabaret Network this past February. Net proceeds from our 2 shows since the last annual meeting totaled $2,000, and since its inception, Maggie's patrons have contributed more than $30,000 to the St. Margaret's General Fund. We're committed to keeping Maggie's going virtually through this year and beyond if necessary until we can gather together again. The rummage sale. Thanks to Julie Poulter and Richard Villeneuve for once again chairing the rummage sale, which experienced another surge in overall revenues and new volunteers. Our team set a new record for overall revenue at over $31,600. Our section managers worked diligently throughout the preceding week to set up merchandise, finish pricing, and keep up the spirits of our many daytime and nighttime volunteers. Our jewelry department, chaired by Kathy Conley and Anamita Betancourt, accounted for over 50% of total sales. The co-chairs would also like to thank our cashier and checkout teams, our cleanup crew, the charities who received unsold merchandise, Damon and his setup and takedown team, and all who participated, purchased, and prayed for our success. We know that we will need to rethink how we would maintain opportunities for our parish and community through virtual activities this year. Stay tuned for new ideas and approaches. We also benefited from Kathy and Anamita hosting our second jewelry pop-up sale, which added over $4,300 to our general fund. In conclusion, it's been my great honor to serve as your junior warden for the past 3 years, working first with senior warden Kathy Siders and rector Kim Lucas, and now Jane as senior warden and Richard as our new rector. This partnership with Jane has been wonderful and treasured as we navigated through transitions, building and budget challenges, and the refreshed sense of mission accompanying the selection of Richard as priest in charge and now rector. To my fellow vestry members, past, present, and future, many thanks for your prayerful focus and enduring wisdom. So much has been learned and so much is yet to be discovered. I believe that God has been and will be with us, and we will see things more clearly as we strive to walk in the way of love in the days ahead. Now it's my sincere pleasure to turn this over to our wonderful senior warden, Jane Quink.
Thank you, Michael. I really appreciate it. And this is a real bittersweet moment for me when Richard asked me my plans for running again. And I did think long and hard and in prayer about what was best for the parish, what was best for me. And I do believe it's time for me, as Linda Heaney will remember, we've talked about it with other ministries, it's time for me to graduate from this leadership. So I'm doing that knowing that I leave you in very, very good hands. I do want to thank all the vestry members with whom I've served, at both as vestry and as senior warden for the past 3 years. And thanks to Richard and Kim, who I've supported, and to all of you who've helped me become a better and stronger leader. You've really helped me grow in my own spiritual growth and personal growth, and I appreciate it. I also really want to thank Mike and I were able to take advantage of what we call our cabinet, our kitchen cabinet, which was Polly Donaldson of past wardens, Polly, Dan Seeley, Ron Lorenzen, Paige Cottingham-Streeter, Kathy Siders. They all have provided us guidance as we move through a very transitional time over the past 3 years. So you may have noticed we don't have a paper report. Because we want to make this short, and one of our decisions was, how do we handle a paper report? As you see, Mike handled some of the report outs on the plant and facility. I'm going to just touch lightly on our ministries around church and worship. My dearest, my beloved Altar Guild, who I remain with and have been with, supported our church, kept our linens going, and kept us tidy and neat. And we will see what our future Altar Guild requirements will be. There may be a lot of Lysol involved, but not sure. Our Flower Guild with Karen and Tony, who supported our beautiful flowers for St. Margaret's Day, along with several of our memorial services, our intercessors and lectors, our lay Eucharistic visitors headed by Bertram, our chalices and ushers. We all appreciate it, and our church service would be poorer without your contributions, and I'm really happy to see there are ways to contribute in the virtual service. As we look back on the year strategically, I tend to forget everything that happened before March 22nd, but a lot happened. We can't forget that we had our 125th anniversary with a series of wonderful former St. Margaret's clergy and speakers. Those were old familiar voices, but for the newer members of the parish, it tied us together, both the newer members of the parish and the more seasoned. We restored and repaired significant elements of our physical properties, as Mike brought up, especially our beautiful windows. We saw an increase in pledging. Our attendance has grown, and it's been a privilege to get to know some of the newer members of the parish. I was really pleased that Annika and Garrison and John Lucas have felt called enough to run for vestry as newer members of the parish. We've also been looking at, as many of you recall, we started the Unstuck Church process a year ago. This was something that we started along with the diocese, one of our trailblazing efforts. We elected to hire the consulting company, and at that time, most of us felt that we were really in a decline, that St. Margaret's was not in a healthy place. And I'm very happy to say that I believe if we took that same survey today, we'd see we were in a growth curve. There were another launch phase of St. Margaret's, which comes with some awkward growing pains, which we're working through. But we have done some of the action items and plans stemming from that work. So rest assured that investment will continue to be leveraged. We obtained grant support from the diocese through, I think, Richard's leadership and connections for worship. We've experimented with one service. We've had experiment with music, a refreshed approach to welcoming newcomers, a real pathway forward from connecting to learning, to leadership. And throughout the year, we've had a closer relationship with the diocese. We were able to, I think Richard has been very transparent. We're trying to be more transparent. So we were able to support and celebrate him in his newly refurbished rectory, which looks lovely. And I was really pleased and kind of glad that the timing worked out the way it did, because I really wanted to be the warden that called Richard to rector. So that was a personal goal of mine, and I was very pleased. And I was really exciting to go through all the questionnaires that you all filled out and see how much community spirit there is, how much unity there is. You know, we're like a family. We're always going to have little bits and pieces that drive each other crazy. But I think we are a family, a community and worship family, in that we are around one goal. We know each other, we support each other, we love each other, and I saw that in our survey results. Now, the vestry had to go through some really tough times, and I hope they forgive me for many 9 p.m. meetings, which I would always get these pained looks like, can we go yet? And I'm like, no, one more motion. But we had to look at becoming a sanctuary. We were really serious about the sanctuary movement led by Heidi Mayer, and we did think hard about that and really looking at our plant. And I don't think it's something that we are throwing off the table now. It's not a top priority as we look at what's happening, but you know, working for justice and immigration justice is something that will always be important to us as we look at providing that radical hospitality. We also looked at this, Mike said, the architecture and real estate. One of the challenges for the vestry to come is how do we have a path forward for sustainability beyond ourselves? The church has been around 125 years. How do we continue to support them with a strong financial foundation? One of which could be leveraging our townhouse property. And that was something that we have done all the work on under the leadership of Todd Torres Douglas, and something that we can pull out and look at. Of course, the real estate market is not what it is, especially for office real estate, but there could be opportunities as we look forward to how we want to work with other parishes, expand Charlie's Place. So that is something that I'm glad we invested in. The parish survey, as I mentioned, helped very much by Karen and Miranda. And that was really very helpful for me to get that information back. We were able, through giving, to define a budget, as you see, with Paige and Kathy's leadership, to almost get to a healthy budget. And I know we'll get back there. In the last few months, we've had to really look hard at our budget. As you know, we've had to make some cuts to our nursery staff, to our paid singers. And I know the vestry is going to be working hard to see what happens in the remainder of this year and the beginning of next, as we look at our rental income and our other event-based fundraising activities, such as Maggie's Cabaret and the Rummage Sale. So, to use a business term I hate to use, we have successfully pivoted to a virtual community life. And I think we can all, you know, we're working through it, we're finding our rhythm, and I know that everybody's doing the best they can. So just to give you a little insight to the vestry meetings, it's not just a business meeting under Richard's leadership. There has been a spiritual regrowth. We do a little Bible study. Sometimes we will check in with each other, and that, I think, helps your vestry stay healthy spiritually to support you. We encourage debate. We have tried to open communication. I know that communication is always difficult, and that is a priority. I know it was a priority for me as your senior warden. I know it'll be a priority for Mike and Jenny. And also, we are lucky to leverage Annika, who has a strong communications background, of how we can talk to each other, touch each other, and continue to reach out. So these aren't easy times for us, and I find that we struggle, and it's unprecedented. And I just, you know, I find that this St. Margaret's community during this pandemic virtually is a source of water as I travel through the desert. So I want you to know that I love you all, and I am so happy I could serve you in this way. And I know I leave you in very good hands. We have much to be proud of, much to look forward to. And I am just so excited to be stepping away and stepping into a new role for whatever calls me next. So thank you so much, and I will turn it back over to Richard.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Jane. Yes, I love the virtual, I forget what they're called, little reactions. I'm going to save my fuller thanks till later because I don't want to get emotional before my address. And I want to pull a bishop's move because many of us have been seated now for an hour. So 20 seconds, invite you to stand, stretch before I move on. Take a stretch break. Okay. So I offer these words in the name of God, source of all being, incarnate word, and Holy Spirit. Allow me to begin by bringing our attention to some scripture from the Gospel of Matthew. As Jesus was traveling with the disciples toward Jerusalem, one of the crowd came up, knelt before Jesus and said, "Teacher, have pity on my child who has seizures and is very ill. The child will often fall into the fire or the water. Even your disciples have failed to effect a cure." After Jesus asked the child be brought to him, and Jesus performed the exorcism, the disciples then came and asked Jesus, "Why couldn't we expel the demon?" Jesus answered, "Because you have so little faith. The truth is, if you have even as much faith as the tiny mustard seed, you can be able to say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you." This passage was the appointed gospel lesson in the daily office a couple of weeks ago. And I remember that morning when I read it that I experienced one of those profound moments when you feel the Spirit's presence, when you know that God is communicating with you. And what some would read as a passage in which grumpy Jesus chastises the disciples for their doubts, I read as a balm, as a direct message to me from God in response to that place I found myself in that particular morning. And maybe it's a place you've been to in the past 3 months yourself. You're doing your utmost to adapt to life in a pandemic. You're zooming away by day, perhaps a little binging Netflix by night, trying to do your darndest to fit in some exercise, plan meals, care for, and stay connected with family members and friends remotely, plan for an uncertain future, yell at the TV when you're watching the news. You're tired. You're not sure how long you can go on like this. Your ability to look on the bright side is waning, and you allow yourself briefly to acknowledge the truth that inside your heart that you don't feel God's presence. You don't know where God is amidst the chaos or how you're going to get through it all. That was the kind of place I was in that morning when I read this passage in Matthew. And it was as if I was asking Jesus, "Why couldn't I expel the demon?" "Because you have so little faith," Jesus told me. But then Jesus encouraged me when he said, "The truth is, if you have even as much faith as the tiny mustard seed, you will be able to say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you." My friends, on my best of days, on my most faithful days, I believe that Jesus' words are true. Nothing will be impossible for us if, and here's the important qualifier, if we place our faith in Christ. God doesn't call us to perform small dreams for God's reign. God calls us to move mountains and to have faith that God will make possible what utterly seems impossible without God. When I reflect on the past year of our life as a parish, and even when I reflect on the most recent past 3 months of living in this COVID-19 world, I see evidence of the Spirit showing us at turn after turn that God indeed makes possible what is impossible. God indeed enables us to move mountains if we but have faith. So the present moment in the pandemic is front of my mind, and it probably is front of your mind too, and what we do in the future, how we respond. And I'll talk a little bit about that. But first, I want to celebrate. I want to celebrate the past year and what we as the people of St. Margaret's have been about as we've grown in our capacity to help people thrive as members of the body of Christ in our diverse and inclusive worshiping community. As has been mentioned, we celebrated our 125th anniversary as a parish. We had a huge, historic, and joyous worship service this past November. We pulled off a record-breaking rummage sale. We celebrated more baptisms, confirmations, and receptions this year than perhaps the past 10 years combined. We called Reggie Cox as the director of Charlie's Place. You restored a beautiful rectory into which Alban and I moved in November. And we've been worshiping together, all together, in one service. And more of us have been participating than when we had 2 services. We've welcomed dozens of new people into the St. Margaret's family, and we have also commended to God a number who have died this past year, giving thanks for their lives and their witness. Indeed, there is so much for which to give thanks to God about our life at St. Margaret's. We see signs of the Holy Spirit's work among us and through us, and we are grateful. In the rest of my time with you, I want to revisit the vital signs for measuring congregational health that we looked at last year, at last year's annual meeting. I'm then going to talk about Charlie's Place, and then I want to think out loud a little bit with you about what the future holds in light of all we're learning in this time of pandemic. I'm going to pull up the slides again. So at last year's annual meeting, we looked at some hard truths about the trends St. Margaret's has experienced over the past 10 years. Declining attendance, aging membership, deferred building maintenance, operating deficits, those are the familiar themes. And after we gave voice to all that stark data, we clarified why we needed to look at these trends. With all of us knowing the challenges, we said, now we can do something about it. On a practical side too, we looked at the unpleasant data so that when we were to gather a year later, meaning now, we would be able to take better stock of whether we are or are not making a difference. Which is why it gives me great joy to show you this slide of all the positive vital signs that the parish has achieved over the past year. This is a snapshot of our parochial report data from the past 5 years. You'll see the metric categories along the left, and then the years on the top. ASA means average Sunday attendance, by the way. But first, I want to draw your attention to these first 2 lines. The Unstuck Church benchmark for healthy congregations looks for at least 5% annual growth in membership and attendance. So that's our membership and attendance growth. We experienced a 14% increase in membership and a 4% growth in attendance over the past year. But we're also up, well, we were up 8% in attendance from January to March, right before we closed the building for in-person worship. So the year-to-date ASA does not reflect any of our virtual worship. I want to remind you too, particularly if you weren't with us last year, you'll see a huge discrepancy between 2017. So to the left of, I'm pointing as if you can see my screen. The left of the 193 number in 2017, the parochial report said we had 460 members. One of the things that I inherited when you called me as your priest in charge is that our database was woefully out of date. I wasn't comfortable signing my name to our 2019 to our 2018 parochial report without going through the process of cleaning up our database. And I worked with so many lay leaders to do that and make sure that we have qualified list of those who are active. And so I made the hard decision to put the real number of how many people we had in 2018, which is why you see the stark difference in those years. So the attendance is moving in the right direction, but we have room for improvement. And I still want to say that the increase, because averages are hard to raise, but the increase from 97 to 101 is tremendous, given that halfway through the year, we went from 2 services to 1. And everyone was afraid that when we went to the 1 service that we would lose attendance overall. But the opposite has been true. And numbers are just numbers, but if you were there, like, we know that the Spirit was palpably present in our worship over the past 6 months, 8 months, when we had combined into 1 service. Another vital sign the Unstuck Church commends is a 6% increase in baptisms, confirmations, and receptions annually. Now, this typically reflects the degree to which your parish is being outward facing, being missional, and growing. And we have experienced incredible Spirit-led growth in this category of sacramental commitments to Christ: 13 baptisms, confirmations, and receptions compared to 2 the year prior. We were moving toward another exciting year this year. We had 2 baptisms already in January, and there were a number of people who completed the spring inquirers class. We transitioned to bring it online when COVID hit, and we did finish that class, and so those people are waiting to be confirmed or received. And we have some people in the parish expecting. So I do believe some more baptisms are in our future, and I have exchanged at least 1 email with the bishop about, let's think about confirmations for the fall and whether we might be able to pull that off. So another important metric that was hard for us to look at last year was how aligned our parish is with the age diversity of the neighborhood. Here's how the age demographics look against, meaning our age demographics look compared to the demographics of the neighborhood. Our neighborhood, much like the entire District of Columbia, skews very young, especially when it's compared to the average age across our country. A third of our neighborhood, so along the bottom line, you have 0 to 17, 18 to 29, 30 to 44, and so forth. The dark blue bar is our zip code's census data, and the light blue bar is St. Margaret's membership. So these young adult categories of 18 to 29 and 30 to 44, you can see a third of the neighborhood is 18 to 29, and another third is 30 to 44. Whereas on the parish side, only 8% of us are 18 to 29, only 23% of us are 30 to 44. On the other hand, we have more members in the other age categories of 45 and up, 60 and up, 75 and up, compared to the neighborhoods. And we've seen growth in these young adult categories. This 30 to 44 category, we're doing pretty well, but there's lots of room to grow in this 18 to 29 category. Also, I think it's interesting to look at this children and youth. We are actually quite on par with the neighborhood, 11% versus 2%. So why do we care about all of this? First of all, as we said last year, it's not because we value those of us who are 45 and older any less than the younger members of our community. It also doesn't mean that we don't want to grow in all categories of ages at St. Margaret's. Tony Morgan, the author of the Unstuck Church Group, writes how research shows that when you target a younger audience, you actually see a trickle effect of growing in other age categories as well. And that's been true at St. Margaret's. I was really curious. So I looked at those who've joined between 2019 and today. And a majority of those who've joined, 37 plus 22, were between 18 and 44. But you still see that we saw an increase in members in the older age categories. We care about how many younger people we have because that's who's in our neighborhood. And we want to be a parish that is meeting the needs of those where God has placed us. All churches should be striving to reflect the diversity of where they are. And in both of the parish surveys that were conducted over the past year, the one that kicked off strategic planning and the one that the vestry led with regards to calling me, a majority of you say time over and over again that a priority for us always should be growing. We need to grow to ensure a vibrant future. And this is the mission field where God has placed us, and we have been excited. Our growth over, so that's enough visuals. Growth over the past year is so encouraging, but we can't take it for granted. It's going to take intentionality and creativity to continue turning our trends of decline around in this COVID world. And I'll say more about the future in a minute, but now I want to talk about Charlie's Place. So Charlie's Place is hands down St. Margaret's most vital outreach ministry. This year, in fact, marked 30 years since the Reverend Charlie Gilchrist, a number of St. Margaret's parishioners, some of you who are in this meeting, began serving rice and beans the Central American refugees who were experiencing homelessness at the time in Adams Morgan. And now the program has grown to operate 5 days a week with a professional staff and army of volunteers. And a majority of our volunteers are not parishioners. It also has its own operating budget while still remaining tied to the parish. And the responsibility for operating and governing Charlie's Place falls to the rector and vestry. Past year was a year of transition for Charlie's Place. We said goodbye to Molly Vetter, and we welcomed the Reverend Linda Kaufman to serve as interim director, and ultimately we hired Reggie Cox as our permanent director. Reggie's leadership is a visible example of how life transformation Charlie's Place helps make possible for our neighbors experiencing homelessness and food insecurity. He originally came to Charlie's Place as a client and now leads it as our director. COVID-19 has brought unprecedented challenges to all aspects of public life, including social services in our city. Back in mid-March, when the pandemic first became widespread in DC and things shut down, all but a few day centers closed in the district. Or like we did, operations transferred to be exclusively outdoors. So 2 months ago, your vestry voted to form a new Charlie's Place committee that was charged with making recommendations about the short and long-term future of the program. That team is still working, that team is still active. I can tell you a few things about what we're doing for now. One team is focusing on how to reopen the building to our guests in the immediate term, how to do it safely, how to realign the budget to ensure that, that we are not helping add to the parish deficit on Charlie's Place side. And the other team is looking at sustainability issues and partnership opportunities for the longer term. The reopening team includes Reggie, Tad Johnston, John Williams, Garrison Gordon, our medical doctor from Unity Healthcare, Will Dixon, and our longtime volunteer, Bob Coe. They're working on a detailed plan for a phased reopening of the building to Charlie's Place guests. We hope to present the plan to the vestry in its meeting in July and begin with a first phase of reopening by the end of July or early August. Everything is compliant with CDC guidelines, the mayor's guidelines, and the bishop's office. And we also have a member of the bishop's staff active in the committee's work. Another team is led by Jane Quink, Polly Donaldson, Jade Williams, Luke Steadwell, and they're looking at longer-term financial sustainability issues for Charlie's Place. As I mentioned, and Kathy mentioned, our finances are tied together, so if Charlie's Place runs a deficit, the parish has to cover it. And with the financial challenges we already faced pre-COVID, and now that have been augmented and accelerated by COVID, we have to do some hard thinking about models that might be possible to assure Charlie's Place long-term sustainability. we have received a generous grant from the Diocese of Washington to cover 2 months worth of salaries for Charlie's Place. Where we're approaching month 2. And successful fundraising of Charlie's Place is dependent upon a clear and articulate phased reopening. So our able fundraiser, Marie Graves, has been holding off on submitting several of our largest grant applications until we have an articulate way forward to share with everyone. And donations to Charlie's Place have been generous. And we do have full confidence that people will respond in generosity because Charlie's Place meets an immediate emergency need directly related to the pandemic. But there is not much more to cut. And so if we face any shortfalls, it's going to be hard to cut anything else because the food and supplies are practically all donated in kind. And so what that means is that the vast majority of Charlie's Place budget is staff. So we need to look at partnerships. We need to consider consolidation or merger with another organization. We've made an assumption that we are committed to continuing to use the building to serve our vulnerable neighbors. We just want to see how we can do it in a way that will augment that capacity and secure it for the long term. So pray for Charlie's Place, pray for the work of the committee that is needs wisdom for the future, and pray for our clients as they're facing unprecedented challenges. So now, before I close, I would be remiss not to think a little bit about the future and comment on how or when we might regather in person. I announced about a month ago that regardless of what the city does, that we would stay Zoom only, online only, at least through the end of August. That doesn't mean that we for sure are going to try to do in-person worship in September for sure. When we attempt in-person worship again will be dependent on a realistic timeline that we haven't even started working on yet. We need a lot of people to come to the table to form a regathering committee to work through all the checklists that are involved. It's a sobering fact that until there's a vaccine, we won't be returning to any semblance of normal as it relates to our in-person worship experience. It's also true that for some among us, it won't be possible or it won't be safe to go to worship in person until there's a vaccine. And you're going to see different churches doing different things, even in our own region. Some of our sister parishes are preparing to open imminently. But inclusivity was and always will be a core value of St. Margaret's. And I believe we're going to need to take our time to forge a new model, our own model for hybrid worship, so that what we do in person does not exclude those who will worship from home. There are many thought leaders across the church, across denominations that I'm following and reading. All of them are trying to predict what lasting changes will occur in light of COVID. And there are 3 trends that ring so true to me that I've read about. These are the 3. Digital is here to stay. The pandemic has made us all more comfortable with being online. And even when we return to St. Margaret's building, even after there's a vaccine, we would be foolish not to continue to seek and engage an online audience in our worship and community life. We need to make investments in a simpler, more engaging, mobile-friendly website. We need to prepare our sanctuary not just for the ability to web stream so that you can watch from home, but we need to come up with the technology solution that will allow those who are participating from home to truly participate, such as setting up monitors in the nave so that those beautiful faces like we see here in Zoom can be seen by those who are sitting in the pews, or so that a person at home might be able to read one of the scripture lessons in the service. Digital was viewed by many churches as optional before COVID, but after COVID, digital is here to stay. Second trend that I've read about that I agree with is churches need to shift from complexity to simplicity. And St. Margaret's was moving in this direction already with our Unstuck Church process. But I think any of us, whether it's in personal life, in work life, we've seen how COVID has made extremely clear what matters most. It's made us as a church razor focused. And I think that's a good thing. The future will require us maintaining that same kind of clear, simple, and accessible way of being church. The final trend I want to mention is that we need a shift from prioritizing worship and program attendance, prioritizing connection and engagement. This was true before the crisis, but the virus has helped us all see how much we value church for its community aspect. I've heard so many of you tell me how even during the pandemic, church has been more important to you than ever. God designed us to need each other, and God gave us the capacity to care for one another. So as people attend worship less and less, we need to remember that the goal is not butts and seats. The goal is people committing to follow Jesus and his way of love. Fostering connection and community will be more important than ever in a post-COVID world. So I promise when I get back from some vacation and by mid-July that you'll hear more. You'll hear more. We need to get the new vestry onboarded. We need to establish a formal regathering committee to work on all the checklists the CDC has put out, the mayor's office has put out, and the bishop's office has put out. There's a lot of details to work through, and it's going to take many of us, just like it's taking many people to work on reopening Charlie's Place. I think it was the right decision for us to move slowly, because we can worship online, but we cannot feed and meet the needs of our vulnerable neighbors online. So I want us to use our building first for our vulnerable neighbors, and then for us, we're ready. So if this is something that excites you, if you have energy around this, I'd love to hear from you. I especially want to be sure that the committee is comprised of people who are eager to get back into the building and feel safe doing that, and it's comprised of those who would have no intention coming back in the building. I want the online-only perspective presented on the committee. All right, so allow me to conclude with how I began. We live in what our tradition calls a fallen world. As a society, we face an immensity of challenges. But as a parish, we've been through an incredible year of renewal and growth, and we must remember that God's preferred future for us is still in sight. It won't look exactly like what we thought when we originally imagined it, but I can hear Jesus telling us that if we have faith, even the size of that mustard seed, we will indeed be able to move mountains. God makes possible what is utterly impossible without God, and for that I say, to God be the glory. Amen. Thank you, everyone. Now move to time of Q&A. I saw that there were some questions that came in while I was talking, so I'll start by scrolling up. How do these demographics compare with the other parishes in DC and the region? I know far less detail about other parishes than our own. I can say that Jane, Mike, and I have, maybe this isn't a good joke, but you could either describe St. Margaret's as the strongest of the less healthy parishes in the diocese, or the bottom of the healthy parishes in the diocese. We're kind of right in the middle. We've trailblazed with the Untitled Church process, and I think the bishop refers to us quite often when she points to success stories of the past year. So it's true, you know, all parishes in the diocese, many parishes, not all, but many parishes are struggling, just like we are. So the same demographic realities that are facing all mainline Protestant churches are true for our diocese. Gail asked what percentage of the parish comes from the neighborhood. I haven't looked at that statistic in a while. We looked at it a year ago when we started strategic planning. I think it's about a third live in the neighborhood. Know how many parishioners are in St. Margaret's zip code? Would this give us helpful information about outreach? Okay. Same kind of question. Okay, and I see Julie's comment. Yeah, data is data, and you can slice it in many ways. Yes, there was a detailed demographic report that was narrative in nature from the Untitled Church, and it is interesting to read. I'm happy to share it if people are interested in this demographic. Are there any other questions? Questions, whether they're for me, for your wardens, for any of the reports that you've heard?
Richard, can you invite the callers just to unmute themselves?
Yes, and if there's anyone on the phone who would like to make a comment or ask a question, please press *6. Unmute yourself. I know we've been going long, so maybe that's keeping questions to a minimum. I'm going to share the screen. To our final fun part here is recognition of service. I need to find my script. This is the fun part. I want to acknowledge our staff. Is my mic still on? I want to acknowledge our staff, our accountant, Nibby Winston, our sexton, Damon Clements, our office volunteers, Sharon Dove, Karen Castro, Gwen Griffiths, Helen Templin, who's also our music librarian, and Linda Harbin Suggs. I want to thank our deacon, Bertram Nagaraja, our adjunct clergy, and Richie and Rochelle Sam, and of course, my colleague, Dr. Tim Doer. He's truly my partner in crime, and we keep each other sane. Tim has provided tremendous leadership in the past year in his new role as both Director of Operations and Music. He was instrumental in helping shape our new worship service, and he and the choir have improved tremendously. They led 2 special evensong services within the past year, and Tim has been very responsive to all the changes that have been coming in light of the pandemic. Others have thanked her, but I want to thank personally Annika Middick for developing the virtual verger customary, for helping with church communications. A shout out to all of you virtual vergers, Miranda, Jenny, Garrison, Mary Alice. Shout out to our volunteer musicians who've led music in our Zoom services. Gail, Naomi, Annie, John, Georgie, Ruthie, Chris, thank you all. We've heard from Paige, but I want to reiterate my thanks to her and the Stewardship Committee, reiterate my thanks to Kathy for her very strong leadership in finances and the Finance Committee. I'm going to mention the wardens in a minute, but the Rummage volunteers, Buildings and Grounds, Garden Committee, Maggie's Cabaret, the wardens didn't mention because this is more ministry area. I want to thank those who make our worship and program ministries possible, the Altar Guild, Flower Guild, the Adult Formation Committee, and Ron's leadership, which is a new role that I'm so thrilled is now an active part of our life, our Sunday school teachers for the kids and our mighty teens, Bertram and his leadership with the Eucharistic visitors, and all who make worship possible, ushers, greeters, vergers, acolytes, lectors, chalices, and the people of St. Margaret's are the first ministers. In your vestry, they say you never forget your first, right? And this vestry has carried so much over the past couple of years, in particular, Mike, there you are. I'm so excited to continue serving with you as senior warden, but I want to pause and give thanks for the ways you've contributed so much to my first season at St. Margaret's. And we are going to miss those who are stepping down from vestry, and I want to acknowledge them here. Todd Torres Douglas and his husband Juan are celebrating the birth of their newborn, Felipa, and so he's stepping down so that he can be a father. Mason Ingram is stepping down after a full term of service. Thank you, Mason. You've brought real energy, particularly around youth and children, and I know you're committed to helping with that moving forward. Regina Curran and her spouse Leo have relocated to Minneapolis. We miss them already. Regina is due to add to their family any day. We'll send out notice when their child is born. And Jade Williams, who joined the vestry very shortly after she was new to the community, and she's been a stalwart volunteer at Charlie's Place, and she, I know, will continue serving on the Charlie's Place committee. And last but not least, Ms. Jane Quink, turn your camera on. You have given so much. You are a true servant leader. I have learned so much from you, and I can't imagine that you're not going to be part of the vestry team anymore. And I know everyone feels the same way, that we cannot imagine the sacrifice that you and Tracy have borne by your giving of so much time. St. Margaret's, I love you. You're amazing, and you deserve a break. We're going to give you a break. I know you all just, the virtual reactions, love. We are giving our departing vestry members a small token of our appreciation. Everyone's going to receive Michael Curry's new book, which is coming out in the fall. Love is the Way, Holding On to Hope in Troubling Times. But Mike and I have joined forces to give Jane a little extra something. So she's going to enjoy a shopping spree at her favorite art store in Bethesda on behalf of the parish and Thanksgiving. I want to acknowledge those who have died in the past year as well. On the far left is Paola Hernandez, who was a client of Casa Ruby, whose funeral we were honored to hold, Eugene Bird. And then the top right is Janet Neal. The bottom right is Michael Suggs. And then left to right is Judy Bowes, Susan Reese. Top right is Hilliard and Tom Blackburn, whose family I spoke to just this week, who was supposed to have a large funeral service right after Easter, and when that will ultimately happen is of course pending. We had a few families move on. Laura Secura and Lucas Trainer just moved to California recently. Kathy Siders has joined her family finally at St. Albans. And Regina and Leo have moved to Minneapolis, as I mentioned. Now the final fun part is we have some 50 or 60, according to the database, who joined St. Margaret's between our last annual meeting and today. So I'm not going to name them all by name because there's too many, but we want to celebrate you. So if this is your first annual meeting and you're new, would you identify yourself in the chat box? For some reason, my chat box isn't working. I see Joe and Suzanne. I see Carol.
Yes, Carol is here. My
Hi,
first
Carol.
meeting.
Welcome to St. Margaret's. We have this, I don't know why I can't, there's the chat. Annika and Ray, Katie Gorence, Giselle, Paul, Garrison Gordon, John Lucas, Carlene and Walter are renewed. Angela, your first meeting, Ed and Jennifer Gamber. Barbara Usher's first annual meeting, although she's been with us for a few years. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being part of our life. Any final business? I Therefore, move that we adjourn this annual meeting and have a closing prayer. Do I hear a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Let us pray. Almighty and ever-living God, ruler of all things in heaven and earth, hear our prayers for this parish family. Strengthen the faithful, arouse the careless, and restore the penitent. Grant us all things necessary for our common life, and bring us all to be of one heart and mind within your holy church, through Jesus Christ, our Savior. Amen.